order. We have all but Bob Hartley. So,
I'm here, Roberta.
oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah. I don't know if I have to leave, but right now I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Somehow. Okay, there, I got everybody. All right. We have a quorum. Approval of the minutes is our next item. I'd like to thank Sherry Jones for taking the minutes at the last meeting. And do we have any corrections or additions to the January 7th minutes? Hearing none. Is there a question?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes.
All right, so moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any disagreement? They're approved. All right, moving on. All right, so our next item, when we thought we were finished with all the policy statements, we have FA 05 because the changes of the new Prop 208 on marijuana. Okay. The attorney reviewed this document and made his changes. I'm not sure why when he put down here under 3.1 in any indoor area, and then he went on 3.2 and only mentioned fenced areas, including swimming pools, racquetball, softball, but didn't mention a lot of other facilities. So that would be my only question. Otherwise, we'll have a motion to accept it as revised, as redlined.
This is Marshall. I move to approve.
All right. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right, Bob, you need to identify yourself for the secretary.
Okay, I'm Bob. I second the motion.
All right. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Any opposition? All right. We'll pass this on to the governing board. All right. All right. Moving on to item 3.02. Ken Holtz is going to review the pickleball architectural design plan. Ken, you're on.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to participate in your meeting today. I am serving at the direction of the Sun City West Pickleball Board as project leader for this expansion project. The promise of pickleball, next slide please, can best be summed up as a principle of if you build it, they will come. Del Webb fully understood this principle when he built retirement communities all across the country because there was a pent-up demand that needed supply and the results were success. Pickleball has demonstrated this same amazing story following this principle. So back in 2007, when we first presented to leaders like yourselves of what could happen with your support and followed by the club leadership action of what followed, a true success story is unfolding and has unfolded and will continue long into the future. Next slide, please. Just to, the purpose of today simply is to bring us up to date on where we are, address your committee questions, of course, look for your support moving forward, and address the topics of these following areas. Next slide, please. So to bring us up to speed, back in December of 2018, when the Space Utilization Committee completed their findings of that year, along with Dig Studio, they presented the master plan recommendations. Included in those plans was a phase 3 pickleball club expansion called Club Funded. Basically recognizing that we were going to need space pretty soon and that we wanted to become part of the capital development plan moving forward. Since we were not included in the 19-20 and 21-22 build-out plan, about a little over a year ago, myself, along with club leaders, met with the governing board president, then Jim Sloan, and our GM, Bill, and just to find out where we stood. And out of that meeting, we basically came away looking at trying to get back on an agreement to get back into the capital planning process. As a result of that, through this past year, in the summertime mostly, we had multiple meetings with Sunseewas Rec Management, discussing the data, the needs, the rationale, site plan, options, layout, all types of things. And away from that, we received feedback back from the GM in September that they understood our needs, that we were part of the capital planning schedule, and that now we needed to look at some site options, and those were presented to us from projects. And then we were to go back to membership to gain their support for moving forward with a vote, which we've done. And also a financial commitment level for the project that we could assist with. Finally, to revise our CR13 to reflect those updates, and then begin presenting to committees like we are doing today. So to date, we present to charter clubs in January, presenting to you today, and we're scheduled to meet with the governing board in the near future. The next step simply is to approve funding for design and engineering, and then ultimately a year from now, approval of the project spending. Next slide, please. So pickleball, where has it been? What's it happening? I mean, we came to the community through tennis in 2002. In 2005, we became a charter club with 207 members with 3 dedicated courts that were built on dirt space that used to be platform tennis area at R.H. Johnson. 2010, the first 10 pickleball courts were expanded at Palm Ridge at an expense of about $230,000. Our club was 600 some members. In 14, we grew again to over 1,000 members. 8 new courts with gathering space was added at Palm Ridge, converted inactive tennis space at a cost of about $267,000. In 17, we needed more space, and we met with a group committee of property, rec management, tennis, pickleball got together to figure out how we could best coexist and keep growing. So in 17, we built 8 standalone courts at R.H. Johnson at a cost of about $360,000, and our membership stood at about 1,300. And today, the club is over 1,500 members, still growing, and we're here to present our needs for the future. Next slide, please. This just gives you an indication of membership growth of the club. The past 5 years, we've been growing 11% on average every year. The projection over the next 10 is using a conservative 3.5% on average moving forward. Basically, we are a club that has a retention rate ongoing for the last 13 years of 82%. Matter of fact, this last year was 86% of retention, and we attract 200 to 400 new members each and every year. Next slide, please. This just doesn't happen without the support of good club leadership and what we've been able to provide for our members. We conduct over 46 weekly play schedule programs. We provide monthly events year-long, attracting 150 to 400 people attending each event. We provide annual tournaments for the club and 1 national event in the spring. We conduct lessons and skill development for over 1,500 participants each season from October through April. And we focus a lot on giving back to the community with our Day for Charity ball drop event that's been conducted now 6 years. We've raised over $116,000 that has been given back to Sun City West nonprofit charities. And our volunteer program, which makes this happen, lists over 550 dedicated workers in specific areas that manage our club from a day-to-day basis. So ultimately, our volunteers, the membership, and along with the Sun City West support has made this happen. Next slide, please. So this translates into activity. In other words, this is utilization. This is the sign-in graph of our growth over the years from 2011 through 2019, representing the high season, which is a measurement of January through April, which is 52% of our annual activity. And you can see the blue area represents the Palm Ridge site, and the green area represents the growth of the R.H. Johnson site since inception. Next slide, please. The key is looking at this information from a per court basis. In other words, we can measure activity, but we need to see how it impacts our need for future in the future. So what we've done here is charted our court utilization per court available at that time frame in the high season, and it shows key dates. In other words, the vertical lines you see in 2014 and 2017 represent pre-periods of construction. In other words, opening new constructions, new sites for pickleball play. So for example, in 2014, we had reached a period of 1,462 sign-ins per court per high season. And we were congested, we needed space, we came to you for support and we got it. We built new courts, so next year, the following year, of course, that number drops because we went from 19.7 courts available in the high season to 21 in the following year. But then we see it continually builds. And now again, back in 2019, we are at a point of where we were previously, where we've had construction actually going on for new sites to open, and we hope to have that near in the future. Next slide, please. So this translates into actual growth of sign-in activity. The blue area represents actual sign-in activity growth, and the projection moving forward is using a 3.5% year-over-year growth rate. The blue top line is total pickleball in the community, and that's annual, and the green line represents high season activity January through April. Next slide, please. So the key to all of this is when you look at people growing in terms of use, and then also the number of participating people through utilization. We manage our facilities to operate at 100% capacity between 7 and 9 hours per day. Now, we're open 15 hours a day. In other words, the courts open up at 6 a.m., they close at 9. And so the question often comes, well, why are we focused on that 7 to 9 hours? Well, the reality is that's the time really available, meaning that, yes, there are people that get up at 6 and play early in the morning, but that's relatively few, except if it's summertime. But we don't encourage people to participate primarily at Palm Ridge until after 8:30 because we're neighborhood stewards. We also try to have things end if we're planning anything for the club, for club schedules by 8:30 at night. And then we also realize that the typical behavior of use is people avoid both the lunch hour and the evening dinner hour. So it basically leaves 9 hours of the day that we primarily use for scheduling all of our activities. And the line that you see here shows actual in the blue of the hours of the day that we're using 100% of our available courts or the facility, and then the projected moving forward. Next slide, please. This represents, I just noticed, Katie, this is the same presentation that we gave Charter Club, and isn't the revised?
Okay, sorry, it's what I was.
No, that's okay. It is, there's just like 4 or 5 new slides that I thought were more property focused. And if it is available, it is attached to the archive for the meeting for today. So I'm not sure if it is easily available to you. Otherwise, I can just talk around it. What do you suggest?
Give me 1 second. I've got all that background material you sent, but this is the PowerPoint that was in the package that was
No,
forwarded.
I'm talking about if you went on to board docs to the property committee meeting of today, the one attachment that's there is a PDF of the updated slides.
All right. Okay. All right, hold on, let me try.
Thank you.
All
And
right.
if we would go to right back to the double line one back, there we go. We just were talking about court utilization for hours of the day. And the reason why this slide is important because it presents the two different site options in terms of the projections that we're showing. The blue line shows actual and projection up into the potential building of additional courts. That green line right on top of that blue line shows a court expansion of 14 additional courts, and the blue line shows an expansion of 18 additional courts. And so it shows taking the projection, the utilization, and the study that we provided, how that plays out in actual usage of the facility moving forward. Next slide, please. All right, so in our expansion objectives, these are the things that we wanted to deliver to ensure the project's success. Number one, that we provide a premier pickleball play experience for our members and the community. Secondly, that ensure adequate space for current and long-term tenure growth is supplied. Number three, support growth of the culture of the club and our member satisfaction moving forward. Four is to continue to manage the club with best practices to ensure the sites facilitate that. Number five, ensure expansion needs support the needs of the community and ultimately provide the most ROI for both the club and the association. Next slide. So this brings us to one of the site options that was discussed and recommended through our discussions, and that is a Palm Ridge concept diagram of connected. This could be a connected, and that is the recommended site option, or it could be near and not connected. The connected site has some property-related issues of rerouting the fire lane to the northwest corner and access to the parking lot. The court specifications remain the same. In other words, they're exactly the same in terms of what is currently built at Palm Ridge. It's adding some shade expansion at the current site and the expansion area. It's adding a storage very much needed storage facility for the site. It provides expanding the traffic for foot traffic between parking and main entrance. In other words, the current sidewalk along the courts coming from the parking lot is about a 40 some odd inch. It wasn't meant to be a main entrance area, but it's resulted in one. So it would be expanded to about 8 feet. Restroom expansion would be necessary if this was built here. And the parking impact of a connected site has a reduction of around 50 to 55 spots. If it was a near but not connected site, it would be a loss of about 80 to 85 spots. And I believe there's like 575 current spots of parking at Palm Ridge. The Kuntz concept basically is a conversion of an existing tennis facility. It affords 18 courts in that amount of space, plus gathering and waiting to play space. It also shows the opportunity both sites offer the opportunity for covered courts as part of the request. At Kunz, it may be a little bit more easily to implement. It requires an addition of a new parking area because of the increased activity, bringing parking up to 428 spots with the addition of those 64. And with the two recent expansion of parking, one that's just been completed with the new 64 on top of that, represents a 38% increase in parking availability at Kunz from the previous. Next slide, please. So when comparing the two sites using the primary objectives that the club has put forth, basically, I'm hearing feedback from somewhere. Anyways, the premier experience can be basically delivered in either of these sites. In other words, both of these sites are excellent options for expansion. They just have different characteristics and trade-offs as you look at them. For court space, basically a build out of 14 courts is probably the maximum at Palm Ridge that would be allowed. At Kunz, 18 courts is easily adaptable. As far as social gathering, waiting to play space, they both would offer a nice area for the expansion of the club and to facilitate operations. Covered courts are both possible at Palm Ridge but very doable at Kunz in looking at that. Member satisfaction and how we've developed the culture of our club. We feel that both can be maintained and grown at either one of these sites. As far as club management of facilities and programs and all the things we do, one site, of course, is easier to manage than two. So that's why the pluses and minuses are mentioned at Kunz, but we feel it's doable. As far as needs of the community, basically the same thing occurs. Anytime you build or add things or make changes, the community gets impacted. There's probably be a few more impacts at Palm Ridge than there are at Kunz, and that's why it's listed that way. The total estimated cost, and of course, all of this still needs to go through design and engineering for ultimate finals. But in working with Carl and his group, he's provided back to us range estimates. And the Palm Ridge estimate is in the 2.2 to 2.5 range. The Kunz estimate is in the 1.6 to 1.8 range. And that would all depend on final decisions. Next slide, please. So to reinforce the benefits, it supports the needs and the growing demand of pickleball in the community. It allows the community to leverage pickleball as a very key retirement lifestyle choice and why people move here. Secondly, a two-site option for the community and club development offers two excellent opportunities for us to evaluate. And the club is going to be able to continually financially support our growth as it happens. Next slide, please. This represents the growth and the support that we provided back to the community in our development. Back in 2010, we came up with $6,000 to help the Palm Ridge development. In 2014, we committed $93,500 to the Palm Ridge facility. In 2015-16, we continued to invest and put $30,000 into improvements to Palm Ridge. In 2017, we helped build with $343,500, the 8-court facility at R.H. Johnson. In 2018, we invested another $18,000 in R.H. Johnson to improve it. And in 2022, the club has approved $960,000 for moving forward in the future. Next slide, please. So just to follow up now is just, if you have questions, if we can't address them today, we would definitely follow up with you. Of course, we're looking for your support for the next step of engineering and funding design. And the key question that I always get asked is, why is pickleball growing at so much a great rate? It simply comes down to these things. It's easy to learn, less space is required, has low equipment costs, it's very fun and social. All old and young can easily play the game. It's easier on our aging bodies, and our players are evangelists for the sport, meaning that anytime you run into a pickleball player, you're going to be invited to play, and once you play, you're hooked. Next slide. These simply may be different areas for questions, but I'd welcome anything from you at this time. Thank you.
All right, instead of having a free-for-all on questions, I'm going to go through the committee membership. Right now, we're just asking questions. Until we have a motion, we won't have an actual discussion on the issue. So do I have any, Barb, do you have any questions?
Can you hear me, Roberta?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I do have a question that I didn't see anywhere in the presentation is, especially for the Palm Ridge side, has there been any discussion with the neighbors in the neighborhood about expansion and the impact?
I'll address that question. Up until this point, I believe there's no appropriate discussion to be have with the community until the clubs or committees like yourself have received the information. But it is important to note that we have what we call our Good Neighbor program. We provide a Good Neighbor program at Palm Ridge to 28 homes surrounding the area, where we meet with them 3 times a year during the October through April period in person. We have a committee that meets with them. We provide them ongoing schedules of our activities so they know what's going on, when we're going to be there, and when we may attract a larger audience of people. We provide them assistance that, for example, in our spring tournament in March, where we attract up to 1,000 people per day, we provide them parking cones to put in front of their homes to make sure that no one is parking in the wrong spots so they don't interfere with the neighborhood. And we also invite all of the neighbors to attend our events when we have them, when non-membership is allowed. And we provide them free lunch and free access to those activities like our Day for Charity, our Fun in the Sun tournament, and so on, so that we can be partners with them ongoing. And if we were to expand at Kuntz, we would develop our Good Neighbor program there also.
Okay. Nancy, do you have any questions? Is Nancy there?
Hear me?
Yeah, you're echoing.
Is that any better?
Yes.
I'm a little bit concerned about projections right now during the pandemic, I guess. I find it's kind of a difficult time to do this of the project. And personally, I know myself, it included many other friends I have. We all started off with pickleball, but we've all gotten hurt. Oh, most of us are sickles and that kind of thing. My concern is just it doesn't feel like the right time to look at the possible growth of this until we've come out of this and maybe have 6 or 8 months of really good numbers. Even to next year, that's just my concern. I think it's difficult to say what the future is going to bring in pickleball after everything we've been through. So that's all.
All right.
Do you want me to address that?
Yes. Do you want to
Okay.
respond?
Currently, just to give you a COVID update in regards to the club, we finished the year in 2020, 35 members below projection, and we know exactly who those people are. Most of them were Canadians that weren't able to travel. We had an 87% retention rate of membership this year, and we've already had 77% of our members renew for the current year, which means we're on target for this coming year. Since we are one of the outdoor activities allowed to participate without social gathering or events, our numbers for daily participation, we're already filling the courts at our projected rates. Pickleball is an incredible sport in terms of demand. If we were allowed to have social gathering now, we would be on top of each other. In other words, in 2019, we were already at a level where we needed more courts. when we do events for sign up, they fill up in hours, not days, in terms of registration. In other words, that we are a very active group. And right now, you are correct. Because of COVID, we aren't allowed to have big events or social gathering, but the pent-up demand for it is amazing. And people are asking for more and more pickleball access. There are areas of the country where they are doing tournaments. Those tournaments are full, they're expanding, and they're sold out. And that's during COVID times. It's just that we aren't allowed to do that, and probably rightly so, because it's not the safe thing to do. But as far as the growth of the sport, we are still in our infancy. The industry is spending millions upon millions of dollars to fund the equipment and supply. The year-over-year expenditure rate across the country for additional venues for pickleball, the number of new 55-plus retirement communities using pickleball as the main primary reason to move there, along with other active activities, is amazing. So all I can say is that pickleball is growing. The growth rate well into the future is going to be astronomical. It's being built into our school systems from grade levels all the way through college. And because of that, a source of pickleball players coming to our community long in the future is a good one. Thank you.
All right, Marley, you have any questions?
Question. Yeah, I realize kids are busy during the peak hours. It's hard to get play during those times. If we covered more courts, would we be able to utilize more courts in the off hours that are not as desirable?
Yes, the primary reason for covered courts is that, and I'll use the high season as an example, but covered courts also impacts the rest of the calendar year in a big way. There, for example, January through April represents about 120 days of possible pickleball play, of which annually we lose about 10 to 12 days due to the following reasons. One is wet conditions. Secondly, because of course, once they become wet, they become unplayable because of safety issues. And it usually takes 2.5 to 3 hours after a rain stops before a court is available for play. So basically you lose out. Anytime the wind, because we're an outdoor sport, is above 12 miles per hour, and because of the type of ball the sport is played with, it doesn't allow the ball to come into play where it's supposed to, meaning that, so it discourages play. And then finally, temperatures. Anytime the temperature starts to exceed 90 to 95 degrees, what occurs is the radiant heat. In other words, because whether you're in the shade or not, temperature is the same, but radiant heat is when you have a surface that heats up like concrete or a ground level, that then permeates through the participant, and that, of course, discourages play. So covered courts affords, basically, if we had covered courts today, we would have 15,000 additional signings per year if we had 8 covered courts. If we had 9 covered courts at Kunz, we'd generate about another 16,500 signings per year. And that's without doing anything. It's simply because it's taking advantage of days that we cannot play today. So it's a big advantage. A good investment.
This is Marley. Thank you for that explanation.
Sherry, any questions?
Yes, I do have several. I understand that we're looking at doing the design portion of this project now, but you've presented 2 options. So I guess this might be more of a Carl question. So would this design phase look into all of this, Kunz, Palm Ridge? What would be the emphasis of the design funds?
I do have design funds for both options. And based on this presentation that Ken has done so well to all the committees, we are waiting for consensus on, and your input on, you know, the feelings of the best location. We have our thoughts from a staff perspective. And then finally and ultimately the governing board. So the preparedness for the future is where we can put in a dollar amount, whether it's pickleball, or a dollar amount projected, whether it's Kuntz. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Carl. My other question is, when this was presented to the membership, it was only presented with the Palm Ridge option, and that's what was voted on, and now we have a Kuntz option. Is
Correct.
the club ready to pay for the Kuntz option also?
Yes. Basically, the reason in the fall is when we went to the membership, and at that point in time, the recommendation from rec management was Palm Ridge would be a preferable site. Of course, in 6 months' time, after we continued to dialogue and investigate and find out new things, and we've always supported either site. If you go back to 2018, we went to the membership then out of the results of the Youth Spatialization Committee and provided feedback to them on Kuntz as a very viable site. So the club is behind both site options. We were asked to come forward with a specific recommendation in dollars of commitment, and in that commitment, one site was recommended to us to include. However, both sites have always been dialogued with the club. The club fully understands the need for our growth, and I'm sure they would be very excited. But technically, yes, we would go back to the membership as soon as we hear back from rec management and your committees, and basically provide a affirmative vote of the same dollar amount for either site that's selected.
Okay, the other question I had, I'm a little concerned with, and maybe it's just COVID, you know, but you have roughly 1,500, 1,550 members in the club, and only 632 were voting. So that to me is less than half of the people gave you a vote.
Well, that's the nature. Well, first of all, to get 600 and some votes out of any organization, anytime you're over 400 gives you a very valid sample size. It gives actually it's less than 3% plus or minus. So statistically, that's a phenomenal response, and I think it's very typical of a club or a national election. You only get so many people that participate in making decisions. But statistically, it's a very large and valid sample size.
All right, Sherry, you done?
No, one more. So looking at the covered, I just have to say this, looking at the covered, I love the idea of the covered because people in the rain and all the reasons you've given for the covered are excellent. I really like the idea of tucking it at Kuntz though, where it's not, you know, this big ugly white thing hanging out there.
It doesn't have to be big and ugly, it could be big and beautiful.
Yeah. So that's just my personal opinion,
Sure.
and I digressed a little bit, but the only other question about the covered park lots or courts is when in the documents it said there would be a shared scheduling system. My only question is, who determines that? Does the rec center determine the shared scheduling? How is it going to be fair for the community who is not a club member to use the covered courts?
Sure, good question. And I think just like in the past, basically all of the courts in the community have been kind of managed by the pickleball club, but we've been very forthright in our communications with the rec department to determining shared equipment, how do we get the balls out, when do they open, how do we manage community courts, how do we do online reservations, how do we do sign-in support. All of those things have been kind of put forth and suggested through the club back to rec management for approval. I would envision the same process would occur here. I mean, it's hard to look 2 years down the road for something we don't have and say, here's how we're going to do it. But if you want me to come up with that ahead of time, I could.
No,
but basically,
I didn't know if I assumed it was a collaboration between you and the rec center. But
yes,
I
it
just
always
wanted
has
to
been.
make the point that if we go to covered courts, we definitely need to make it available to non-club members as well. And my concern is in some of the earlier, Palm Ridge was looked at as being a club facility, and then RH Johnson would be the community facility. But the covered courts will not be at RH Johnson. They will only be at Palm Ridge or Kuntz.
Right. The important distinction there is, for example, I'll use the online court reservation system that the club proposed to rec management to utilize for the community, of which the club uses and the community uses. That is available also for the Palm Ridge site, meaning that even though we booked the vast majority today of our club programs when we've been allowed to have them non-COVID, that the online reservation system still shows plenty of opportunities for the community to play at Palm Ridge. In other words, there's programs going on that are specific courts for the club, and then there's courts available for online open court time. The same process could be utilized for covered courts. And I think the key distinction, for example, is during the inclement days. In other words, on inclement days, that's when those 8 or 9 courts will be in extremely high demand. And for the club to say, no, those are ours, they're scheduled for club activities, would be wrong. During those days, it would probably be an open court time, a reservation system, so the entire community has access. That's just the
Thank you.
concept. Okay.
All right,
Thank you, Ken.
John. All right, John, do you have any questions? John Nichols? Is John on the line? John, we don't hear you. All right, I'll move on. Bob Hartley?
Yeah, this is just asking questions, right? It's not to make comments.
Right, it's just to ask questions.
Okay, I've got 2 questions. One is that men's round robin is considered a high time usage, isn't it?
We have multiple men's round robins throughout the week. They're scheduled most of the time, I believe, starting in the afternoon. So one is at 1 o'clock. There might be another one at 3 o'clock. And I believe they're starting some evening ones now, too.
Okay. So when I was there other day at round robins, and that's a high use time period, and at Palm Ridge, and there were still 6 empty courts. That doesn't sound like you're using that. Sounds like you have plenty of courts to use. It's kind of like, why are you saying you're short courts?
Well, are you comparing that to today? In other words, you've recently experienced that?
Yeah. Within 10 days, I recently did that on Monday afternoon. I went there. I used to play pickleball. I've done round robin, men's round robin, so I've been involved in it, and so I know that's a very high volume time that they have. And so I wanted to make sure I got there at Palm Ridge with round robin, and it was a beautiful day at 63 degrees. No wind, no rain, no nothing, and there were 6 empty courts at Palm Ridge, and nobody waiting for a court.
All right. So basically, what's occurring today is, earlier I mentioned that the club has 47 weekly programs we typically offer. Today, we only have 11 of those going on because of COVID. In other words, so there would be plenty more activities we would be scheduling if we could. All of our current training opportunities, we don't have going on, which is over 1,500.
Well, I understand that, but I also know that, in other words, that round robin, when I was there at round robin, that in other words, there was nothing else scheduled. It was it's a very popular time for men, and it's high usage, and there was nothing else scheduled at that time period because men's round robin took up most of the court. Which at the time period that I went there, they didn't. So I kind of have a problem as to, you're saying, well, we're shorthanded courts, and every time I go, I mean, I've since this whole thing came up, I have been checking the usage all the time. There's always courts available at Palm Ridge. I went there on a Sunday, which you said prime time is during the day. I go every Sunday over there, and there's always 4 to 5 courts available. So and I get here and I just kind of take a look at things like that. And then R.H. Johnson, I'm at R.H. I'm by the courts at R.H. Johnson probably 5 days a week, and at least 70 to 75% of the time it is vacant courts. 75% of the time there's vacant courts. There's at least, out of the 8 courts, there's at least 6 available all the time. And so, I get here and I go, so where is this, demand that you say that you have? I mean, when you come to us and you ask us for expansion, I get here and I go, I want to see every court full before I get here and say, let's go ahead and do it.
All I can provide to you is that the sample of when you're looking at are finite. In other words, and they're also during a COVID environment. All I can provide to you is the historical growth of the club, the actual sign-in activity, the translation of those sign-ins into actual utilization, the comparison of that utilization to when we built courts and grown into them, and the growth we've had behind that. The growth of our activity in terms of programmings has gone from when I was first president of the club from 6 programs a week to today of 47. That will continue to grow. So we have to look at this from a long-term perspective. I'm reluctant to look at it from a snapshot perspective.
Okay. My next question is, when sign in, that's when someone walks in and tells the monitor their card. Is that correct? Their card number?
Correct. The current process for measuring sign-ins is different at different facilities. For example, the R.H. Johnson facility does not have a monitor. It's a volunteer sign-in application. The club follows the rules, hopefully most of the time, so we probably anticipate a 7% people missing out. The public, or the non-member club member use of the facility, which is high, I would doubt any of those people sign in very often simply because they don't realize why they should do it or how. Secondly, at Palm Ridge, there's a couple of different things that are checking the system. The Sunset West Rec Management has a regular schedule of a monitor that is on site during specific times of the day. The schedule of that is theirs to manage. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. That purpose of that is primarily not to check the person in to the site. It is to monitor that they are eligible to use the site, meaning that they are residents of the community. That's the only thing they're checking. We provide a electronic scanning device located next to the monitor by the entrance, and all of our club members are educated to know that they are supposed to scan their rec card each and every time they use the facility. Secondly, if their rec card isn't working properly or if they forgot it, we provide a hard copy sign-in document at the site right next to the scanning area. Both the scanning data and the sign-in hard copy is then provided on a monthly basis using the CR4 process, I believe, for ensuring that sign-in activity is managed. So in our overall actual sign-in activity, we are just showing what has been collected through the Sun City West Rec Management process. We know that the number is actually greater than that because there's people that forget to do it. But that's how it's done today. And I know Katie presented at one of the meetings prior that I participated with that there is improved software and systems coming to charter clubs in the future to help them manage the control and the measurement of actual sign-in and participation of their space.
Okay, so my thing is that when I went to Palm Ridge to check the men's round robin, I told the monitor that all I wanted to do was walk in and look at the courts, and I'd be out in a couple minutes. And I was demanded that I present my card and have it scanned. So in other words, the 4 minutes that I was there looking at the courts, I was put on your list as a player.
That's currently the Sun City West Rec policy. So
Okay, so people that just want to come in and take a look. So when you get there, say there's people that aren't signing in, there are people that are being forced to sign in that don't play pickleball. In other words, that monitor said if I was to cross the threshold, I had to present my card. And
right.
At that point, I was counted. And so if someone crosses that threshold, so I would say your numbers are probably pretty correct because there's just as many people that are being told they're playing pickleball, even though they're not, because the monitor takes their card, as people that forget to do it.
Your example is accurate in its description. However, I believe it would represent a very low percentage of representation. Only that, especially during a COVID environment, people aren't wandering around today. They're going to most things for a purpose. Secondly, the number of visitors we get to just check in is mostly through an organized fashion of tours that are provided by Sun City West Rec Management. We would typically have 30 people come through on a weekly basis. Of course, now we don't have those. Those people are not counted, of course, when they're coming to view.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, Marshall, do you have any questions?
What kind of a reduction in play have you found since COVID started?
The reduction, the number of participants, first of all, COVID started for our club approximately March 18th of the last spring. That was the right in the middle of kind of prime time high season, if you will. I can provide you that the actual participation prior to the closure, prior to COVID, was up over the previous year and on projection of growth that we had projected. During the shutdown period of March 18th through, I think, the middle of June is when we were closed. There was no, of course, nothing captured. Then during the startup in the summer period, there wasn't a procedure to follow for check-in for a while. And now back in start that summertime is over in September, the numbers for participation are on projection. In other words, they're not where they would have been because we're not allowed to have events. We're not allowed to have specific programs. But if you would go out there on a day to like today, anytime it turns 50 degrees, in other words, the pickleball play starts when it turns 50 degrees and warmer, because below that balls start to crack. But you're going to find it very, very busy courts. And you're going to find that the programs that we're allowed to currently provide are slotted, and we slot them throughout the day. So yes, today in a COVID environment, we're not fully utilizing our capacity, but it's a unique situation. If we didn't have COVID, we would be on top of each other.
Thank you.
Right.
Roberta, I think my questions have been answered already. Thank you.
All right, John, did you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Okay, Ken, over on Coots,
Yes.
has anybody talked to the tennis club to find out what their feelings are about giving up their courts?
That once again is not a club responsibility. That would be a Sunset West Rec management responsibility. And I would leave it to them to handle that question.
Okay, is there anybody who wishes to address that? Okay, the next thing is, has anybody over at Coots, from the club standpoint, talked to the neighbors to see about how they,
Basically,
what their views are?
a similar question was raised earlier about talking about a site option and expansion at either Palm Ridge or Coons. And my reply was simply, I think it's too preliminary to have discussions about something that hasn't even been addressed by the key leaders or decision makers through committee or governing board. And that process of open communication is being conducted only through, right now, through our participation of these presentations for people willing and wanting to listen and view. And at some point in time, through the budgetary process for open communication to the community on how money is being spent and how they're being approved and whether or not you agree or disagree or what questions you have. So it's too early for the club to participate directly in that. It's more of the responsibility of rec management and the governing board and the committees to dialogue.
Okay, I think my big concern here is that Carl's going to be presenting the proposed budget here, spending about $100,000 for planning when these things haven't been done up to this point. Talking to tennis, because I know that on the earlier committees discussions that we had in 2017, 18, and 19, tennis had some wanted to participate in the conversation, especially when Coots was involved. And as I said, I haven't heard anything from the GM or the club or anybody as to whether they've been added into this discussion. One thing, and I'll bring it up here, even though it probably belongs in the other area, the concept of drawing for Coots shows an addition of 64 parking spots. And I anticipate is that if all 18 courts were filled, you would need closer to 90 parking spots, if not a little more. We just spent the last 2 years discussing the expansion of Coots, and part of the discussion was that we were short courts, even without pickleball being involved. We added 40 courts, and that barely brings us up to what we needed just for Coots before pickleball. The other thing is that how do you get if we went with Coots and we did 64 plus parking spaces, how do you get the pickleball participants to use those 64 spaces, which are inconvenient to the rest of the Coots people?
You want me to address that?
Can you first?
Okay. First of all, the additional 64 located site was, I believe, part of the original master plan recommendation back in 2018. So it has been reviewed through projects and through Dig Studio in terms of its implementation possibility and practicality. Secondly, the actual site of that is very adjacent to, it's actually closer to the current area that we walk with our Palm Ridge site. So the flow would work for us as a club in terms of whether or not we utilize it and not take up the wrong spots. I think that's a behavior modification that our club needs to have with our members. Of course, you always have people that break the rules, whether it's they try to do the best thing possible or not. But I think the vast majority of our people are good residents and will follow the direction of the club. Finally, the incremental space, we currently utilize at Palm Ridge during the high season, about 60 spots to 65 spots per day for parking. We have a very high participation access of our courts through bicycles and also golf carts, in other words, and we've tracked that. So we know we need more golf cart parking and we need more bike rack availability. And that utilization isn't all at one time. In other words, because the sign-in activity happens throughout the day, typically it requires, if you look, in other words, we're not all coming to the court at one time and all leaving at the same time. It's a come and go. So people are utilizing the same spots throughout the day. So the addition of 64 spots dedicated for, if they were all dedicated for pickleball, would more than enough cover our needs in terms of utilization, unless we're having a big event. In other words, and then we'd have to communicate how we're going to do that, whether we're sharing the event between Palm Ridge and Kunst, if we're doing that. If we're having one large event at one area, we would do like we do now is when we communicate with the rec centers to say, here's what's happening. How do we best share the space that's available? So it's always comes down to communication and planning to make sure things work.
And John, this is Carl Wilhelm. I'm sorry I didn't hit my mic button in time to answer your question earlier, but to date, this all being preliminary discussions for everybody to hear through the committees and the governing board. The tennis community has not been had a sit-down discussion, and but I would like to remind that when we did the project for tennis with the 16 new courts, it was made very clear that future investment in the Kunst location would not be made. And during the space utilization studies, I think we made it very clear there too that through long-term design plans that we have shown that space could be utilized for other options, and that's just the stage that we're at right now. And this is one of the viable options. So I believe when the timing is right, the appropriate clubs that are affected would have a discussion.
Okay. I think basically what you're saying, before you spend money on doing things, you're basically be a thorough review and probably take a look at it. I'm also concerned with the restrooms because at one time, right now you have one stall for women and one for men. And earlier discussions were that you would need at least two, so you'd have to expand the restrooms in front of the facility. And I'm not sure whether that was something that management, or I should say that the staff had come up with, or is that something that the county was going to require?
That would have to be considered in all design plans because yes, it is a you know, a facility count of persons being used. So at both Palm Ridge and Kunst, that will be taken in consideration during design discussions.
Okay. That's all for this part of it.
All right. Our board president, George, you had some questions? Is George there? George not online?
He's there, Roberta.
right.
He's having mic issues. Give him a minute.
Okay, because Katie said that there was a question from the audience.
Yeah, while we're waiting on George, I'll go ahead and drop those in there. Mr. Van Tool, this may have been answered already. Instead of 12 courts, how about 6 courts with covered structure? So our people can use it during the summer and the raining season. And he also mentioned we didn't have the option for coons on our vote to the membership. So I think we've addressed both of those, but if anyone wants to respond. All right.
It's covered from our end.
Okay, yeah. The other questions were from Mike Casanda. He wanted to know about the total cost to the community, and I don't think we're at that stage yet, but I did see in your presentation, Ken, the commitment from the Pickleball Club. What does it do to parking? I do think you covered that one. What about the noise factor? What does tennis say about taking their courts? I think we've addressed that one as well. Isn't there supposed to be a separation of the 2 different courts? And can the community afford this multi-million-dollar investment for a sport that already has more courts per capita than almost any other facility in the country? So we've covered some of that, but if anyone wants to address those other questions.
Ken, do you have any response?
To which particular, is there, because some you mentioned that were covered, I didn't want to duplicate.
Well, I was talking about the cost.
All we can do
You
is
did say the club was going to pay the majority of it, right?
the club will basically be able to contribute. At this time, we can look forward and say that we can dedicate $960,000. And it doesn't mean we're not going to continue to contribute in the future. We've always contributed to our growth moving forward. It's just that we can only project at this time and place over the next 10 years what we can contribute.
I think the only other question that may not have been answered in his was about the noise. And Carl,
Sure.
correct me if I'm wrong, but we haven't done enough study into it because it's still too preliminary to have done a noise study. Is that correct?
And I would agree with that, but it has fully been discussed between Pickleball and the staff that's been working on this, and the club has respectfully asked that to be a primary focus on the Palm Ridge site, and we don't believe that is so much of an issue at the Kuntz site, and the club has expressed of their community care program on how they, involve themselves with their adjacent community members. So I think we have answered that question now.
Roberta,
Thanks, Carl.
this is
There's no other questions from the public.
Roberta, this is Sherry Jones. Sorry, I do have one more question, and that is the parking at Kuntz. Will that take away from that walking area?
I do believe that the walking area could be designed as and reincorporated creatively, but it does certainly affect that area, at least 50% of it. And but we do have other optional walking areas throughout our community here at R.H. Johnson, the Beardsley Park area, and again, it's not something that we just would demo and not reconsider, but it will be discussed during the design stage.
Okay, thank you.
Is George there? Are we still having mic issues for George?
Yeah, his lips are moving, but nothing's coming out.
Roberta, this is Marshall.
Yes.
I had a question written down and I forgot, I missed it. In the schematic with the new courts at Palm Ridge, this indicates that that'll only be one entrance into the parking area for the whole facility, right?
No, that is not correct. So the current entrance, where the proposed new courts would be dissolved, and we would move that to the end of the courts and create a new entry. So you would still have to follow all codes per fire and county, and we would just we propose to establish a new entry on the opposite side of the build.
Oh, on the north edge of the expansion courts, right?
Yeah, I didn't use north, south, east, or west because I can never remember which direction that actually faces.
Yeah, me neither.
Northwest corner.
But we do have to maintain an entry, and we do have to maintain a fire lane, and we have already had that preliminary discussion with the fire marshal, and that is not a problem at this point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Roberta, Barb Sloan here. I have a question for Carl.
All right.
Carl, Barb Sloan here. When I was looking at your presentation that got linked and sent out to us, I saw that the Coons proposal was part of your capital budget. The Coons proposal for converting those pickleball courts. Is it your understanding, or can you clarify for us that whether or not property were to approve moving this forward to pickleball, that the rec center is actually investigating what to do with those courts there?
Are you saying that if Kuntz was not selected, what would we further do with the Kuntz area?
No, sir. What I'm saying is I saw Kuntz addressing the tennis courts in your capital budget piece. Is that something that the rec center is moving forward to, wanting to move forward on, regardless of whether or not pickleball courts went there?
No, that is not. If you look at that slide again, it clearly says pickleball expansion request, and the dollars for the designing and engineering and all the stages that would be involved in those dollar expenses. It has nothing to do with any future movement or decisions on tennis, regardless of the decisions when this is complete.
Okay, does that mean then that there is a shared expense of those? I think it was what, $116,000 or $161,000. Is pickleball responsible for a portion of that expense?
That has not been shared with me from the general manager or the governing board yet. That is part of this process and getting through all the committees, and then ultimately ending in the lap of the governing board.
Okay, thank you.
Hi guys, I finally got help from Katie. Thank you guys so much for putting up with my operator error. Ken, my couple questions are basically something that I don't think you'll be able to answer right now, but I'm sure you want to be able to. First one is I'm very concerned with your growth numbers. Your growth numbers continue on a path where you do not have a base going forward. The base of your number are 71.4 million boomers. Right now, Gen Xers are moving in. They're a 9% base less. So I am very questionable about your growth numbers continuing to go up at that point. You have less people to draw from. You have less people that can fill in and take up positions of people who are leaving. That's number one. Another question I have, is this for your convenience or is this a true need? Because once again, as been stated before, there's been quite a few times where courts are empty, courts are not being used, and things in that. I also am going to question your 9 hours a day. That's a difficult thing. When you say you're basing your play on 9 hours a day, you are definitely going into that I want to play early in the morning, and that's all I want to play at. And I think that the other one is you have a continuation of 3 community courts over here at R.H. Johnson, and everything else is reserved. I think if you're looking at something when you said at the association, the question that I would have is 3 community courts is pretty slim. I think you really need to look at that. And the other one that I have, that's been fun there. You said that there's dollars there, there's fundraising involved, and I think that that's a question you need to put through our accounting department. Those are my comments, and you don't have to answer them now. You can come prepared to the when you come before the governing board with those issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All
The
right.
one, Roberta, the one question I would answer for George today is the discussion and the plan for community use of pickleball is that once the expansion would take place, all of the courts that are club managed, in other words, for our programs, would be at the expansion sites. In other words, either if we're going to Palm Ridge, it would be all at Palm Ridge. If we're going to two sites like Kuntz and Palm Ridge, all of our club managed programs would fall to those courts. The current 8-court facility at RH Johnson, we feel would best be provided to the community as all community courts. Only because at that level, we have found that 8 courts, when you subtract 3, remaining only 5 for club management, is actually too small of a site for club programs to fit into. So the growth of community play would be greatly enhanced by having RH Johnson as all community courts.
All right, thank you. Okay, do we need to do a motion just on the design plans? Carl? Carl there?
I'm here.
All right,
I
do we
believe
just need,
I believe that this is just like our previous presenters from other clubs where you give your recommendation of positivity or whatnot to the governing board.
all right. Do we
Second
have a
portion of this-
motion? Oh,
Go ahead.
sorry.
Well,
Do we have
this
a
is Bob. I'll
motion?
make a motion. I'll make a motion as long as we have discussion before we vote.
Yes, we'll have a discussion.
All right, then I make a motion.
What's your motion?
Well, there's that, you know, we have a vote on whether this goes further.
Well, this is just the design phase, right, Carl?
Yeah, so I make a motion that, you know, that the design phase, I don't know, I guess Carl would be the best one to say is what the motion should actually state.
No, that is not my area of expertise. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. Then on the other ones, what motions did we have, like for the well,
So-
for the garden club?
This is Sherry. You want me to help you out?
Yeah, help me
So-
out on this.
So I make a motion that we approve the design dollars for the pickleball expansion.
Okay,
Do we have a second? Waiting on a second.
This is Marley. I will second it.
All right, thank you. Okay, now we'll open it up for discussion.
Roberta?
yeah, okay, this is Bob. Could I talk first?
Well, somebody, I heard my name. Was there a particular reason?
This is the
No,
governing-
Wait,
I-
wait.
no, this is, yeah, this
wait,
is Bob.
Bob. No,
Can
is
I go
that
ahead and talk
Marley? Is
first?
that you?
You don't want to recommend the design dollars. You want to recommend the design plan to the governing
Okay,
board.
thank
Oh, that
you.
was Karen. All right, thank you, Karen. All right, so we have a motion to approve
so
the
I-
design plan.
Yes.
To go forward with the plan.
Go forward with the plan. And we had a second. And now we open discussion.
Yeah, this is Bob. Could I speak first?
Yes.
Okay, I think I have several subjects that I have here that I think might help a lot of people. And one is this is really based on two things. One on projection of what they say the club is going to be, and one is on usage. And that comes back to a want or a need. The first thing, I have a big big thing with the projection. And there's no doubt that pickleball is very popular. And when he talks about pickleball, he's using projection numbers that for pickleball nationwide and multi-age wise. The problem is that we're 55 and above, and I'm exactly like Nancy. I am a very active person. I've done pickleball. I'm in a bicycle club. I'm in a hiking club. I do all kinds of outdoor activities, and I had to get out of pickleball because of injuries. Pickleball brings out injuries that you have had in the past or creates injuries that you've never had before. And so as we grow older, the club is going to see a decrease in numbers just for the primary reason. Everybody that I started pickleball with, all my friends, there's not a one of us that are still playing pickleball. So eventually these numbers are going to decline. We have young people coming in now. I see it in the bicycle club. But yet several years ago, before the new people came in, the bicycle club could barely make numbers to have a membership, and there's to have enough members to be a club. So the activity things, as we get into our high 60s and 70s, we have to drop out of that. We can't continue at the rate that we have. So there is going to be a decline further on down the road. So I have a problem with the projections. And when they sit there and they talk about the numbers that they have, their numbers aren't skewed because of COVID. During the summer, I am a trail monitor for the Forest Service. All outdoor sports have seen a drastic increase due to COVID. You cannot buy a bicycle. You cannot buy outdoor equipment. Our numbers, one of our things that I did as a trail monitor is I kept numbers. We had 2 to 3 times more people on the trails than we did last year. And the bicycle club is at a record number of people because people want to be outdoors. They feel safe outdoors. So this stuff of COVID is not creating the numbers. This is an outdoor sport. Should be more people playing pickleball now because they want to be outdoors. There's more people on the hiking trails than there ever have been. So the numbers are saying we can't blame COVID for them not having the numbers. So then it comes back to use. When this came up for the past 2 months, I have constantly been going by these courts. There's no doubt that Palm Ridge has more usage than R.H. Johnson, but Palm Ridge, every time I've been there, there's always been empty courts, and there's never been someone sitting around waiting for a court. R.H. Johnson, like I said, 70 to 75% of the time that it is empty. So in other words, they have 8 courts there at the most. During the middle of the day, there's 2 courts being used. So I don't see I see what we have as far as what we have right now, as far as people, we have the courts to handle everything. And I don't think we should be able to get here and say, well, this is what we project a club to be down the road. Right now, this is just a want. This is not a need. This club, pickleball, does not need more courts. As far as I'm concerned, the courts that they have are very adequate for the number that they have. And I don't see any reason that this should go forward.
Roberta.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Roberta, Barb Sloan here.
Yeah, Barb, go ahead.
This is a difficult one because in the interest of space utilization and long-range planning across generational usage, as you project out 5 to 10 years, personally, I would support moving forward on this. But the thing that throws a wrench in the wheel for me is the fact that all the paperwork that was originally presented to us on this motion moving forward was all on Palm Ridge. There's no adjustment in the paperwork that says that they went back to the club and discussed Koontz. And so I think we're when you think of parliamentary procedure, I think we're missing that link. I think that paperwork needs to come back to the property committee with the appropriate approval by their club for either or site. So on this motion, I do not support both sites. I think that we have a piece of property that is being underutilized, and I think that needs to be moved forward based on the overall projected courts and stuff. And that's the only way I could support this.
Well, Ken, could I ask you a question? Where it's either or, it's not both, correct?
Make sure I understand the question. Basically,
is it either or, is it going to be either the expansion at Palm Ridge or Koontz, not both?
correct. In other words, at this stage, if Koontz was selected as the expansion site, there would not be a footprint enlargement at Palm Ridge for court space.
Okay.
There would be some minor improvements, but not court space.
But what their CR 13A form says is that it does. The one I'm looking at now says R.H. Johnson and Koontz. Is that correct? The one on 28 December?
Which form are you looking at, please?
I'm looking at the submitted CR 13 form for remodeling requests over $5,000. Everything that this committee received as far as your club membership approval and everything was specific to Palm Ridge. No discussion in the CR forms. So based on procedures, and Karen Repkin can direct us on this, I think that they need to resubmit their CR 13 forms back to this committee.
I think it needs, this is Sherry Jones. I think it needs to go back further. The club voted on just the Palm Ridge expansion. The Koontz was never presented to the membership. We have not voted on a Koontz expansion.
May I comment? This is Ken. May I comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, going into the revised CR 13 and club approval that Sherry's mentioning in the fourth quarter of 2020, we were presenting both options as possible for the club. Once we received a recommendation from Sun City West management that Palm Ridge would be the preferred site for expansion, we then went to the membership with the recommendation, because we were supposed to provide a revised CR 13 and a club dollar commitment. That is correct, that we specifically stated the dollar amount and then also the site of Palm Ridge. However, I can tell you the club will support the additional other option. And if you wish to make your motion conditional upon support of that, that's within your power, meaning that, in other words, that your approval today is conditioned upon the revised CR 13 and club vote of approval.
I would make, this is Barb Roberta, I would make that motion. The paperwork has to be correct.
Well, then the motion would be amended to add condition. Go ahead and state your amendment.
This is Barb. The motion needs to be amended to that approval of the motion is contingent upon revised CR 13 forms indicating club support and club dollar commitment.
For either site.
For either site, the paperwork that's submitted right now is not correct based on the motion we're anticipating. It needs to be correct.
Yes, and that's very viable for the club to provide to you in a very short period of time.
Okay, then Roberta, in the motion, we give them 2 weeks or something like that. That needs to be part of the motion.
Well, it's whether we have to, once we approve it, it goes off to the governing board.
But we're doing a conditional approval based on action, requested action by the club that's submitting the CR 13.
Well, if we vote
So-
for that, then they would have to do it before the 17th, because
Yes,
that's
they
the
would.
next governing board meeting.
Yes, they would, or it would have to be tabled till the next governing board meeting.
Right. All right, do we have any other discussion?
This is Marshall. Let me
Go ahead, Marshall.
try to clarify. Let me try to clarify something here for me. Are we saying that we could approve a Koontz and not Palm Ridge at the time we end up doing it? Can we approve the Koontz renovation and not the Palm Ridge? Carl, aren't we stepping on ourselves here with the new parking lot up there?
I will say this by experience, you are not approving anything. That is ultimately the governing board's decision. Your choice today is about these recommendations to move forward, and I'll just say sorry on behalf of staff that staff reintroduced the Koontz option to the pickleball club, and that was over within the last few weeks of a much higher level of discussion for options from key leadership and from a governing board just comments. So that is why Koontz has probably missed the ultimate change of CR 13 forms, and I think your request of amending the recommendation or the motion currently is probably, the correct thing to do is to make sure that the paperwork is correct. But both sites are still up for the design option.
Okay, my second question. With the Palm Ridge option, we're supposedly, in last year's budget, we were going to resurface the parking lot up there. So would this interfere with that plan?
I wouldn't call it an interference. I would say that it's a great question. So from the point of discussion in the summer with the club, we brought this up, and if Palm Ridge was ultimately selected as the final design space, then I would not do the asphalt corrections this coming May, June, and that is about a fifth of the parking lot, and that would create a fifth of the savings approximately to date. So I would not waste dollars or time having the contractor do the allocated space of design for Palm Ridge. If Palm Ridge ends up not being clarified by the time I'm ready to do that project, then I would hold off. Otherwise, like I said, it was a good question.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion with an amendment. The
Hey, I
amendment
would like
was
to make a
not
comment.
seconded.
This-
We need the amendment seconded before we can continue with the amendment.
Okay, could somebody read it?
So here's what I have. Sherry's taking notes today, sorry. So the original motion was to move forward with the design plan for pickleball expansion. Barb amended it to change request 13 from the club support and club committee on either site needs to be completed. And Barb, correct me where I'm wrong there.
No, that's correct.
So that's
Okay.
what I have for the amendment.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay,
And
John
this
has
is
seconded.
Marshall? Is that Marshall?
Pardon?
No,
Th-
John.
Marshall seconding?
John Nicholas.
No,
This,
John Nichols.
this is
Okay.
Nancy. At some point, I have something.
Okay. I just,
This is a
okay.
hard way to do a meeting. I just had just a couple things that, I agree with on. I'm back to want or need. This is really just putting us into the realm of that we can hold a lot of tournaments here. Obviously, there's a lot of tournaments held in Sun City, but it seems like this is setting us up to be the, the place of Arizona or bigger that we can have tournaments now. I don't know if we're a pickleball community. I think that we're a golf community, but pickleball is extremely popular, and of course I've played it. I still have my rackets. If this gets put off for 1 to 3 years, will this initial engineering still be good? We don't know what's going on with COVID, and let's just say we're going to come out of it clean. I don't know, but if this goes for if it gets tabled and we go ahead and we spend money on the engineering, and we get back to this in 2 years, is that still going to be valuable? And I know our staff can answer that. And back with Barb, that we need this new form. And I don't know if you can do it in 2 weeks. I'm not sure. It seems to me that it needs to be voted on. I think that's pretty quick. I also take a little bit of an issue that 2/3 of your people did not vote enough to vote. And I know you said if you get 400 votes or 500, statistically very good. And in a popular national election, you're right. But, almost 2/3 of your club didn't even find that this need was so big that they didn't even vote. 600 did, 900 didn't. That has me a little bit concerned of how accurate all of these numbers are with your active members. So that's about all. I like Barb that, we've got to get back to a regular form. I don't see that can be in by the 17th, but then I'm not a member of this club. So that's all, folks. Bye-bye.
So this is Sherry. What I'm wondering is, why is it so critical to have this by the 17th? I think we should require the form to be done and the vote to the membership to be done, and then it comes back to property and we approve it at that time. That's just my
Well, I
opinion.
think it would have to go to chartered clubs first, because they've already voted on it.
Well, I have to go back, but I think you need to get the paperwork in order before we approve it.
This is Barb. I agree. We truly need to follow parliamentary procedure here and rec center guidelines that goes out to all other clubs on how you dot the I's and cross the T's. And this needs to be amended. If the club can do it by the 17th, so be it. I will answer Nancy's discussion about voting, in that, remember that the rec center only requires 1/3 of your members to vote. So
yeah, I get that. We're talking $2 million here. We're talking 900, almost $1 million of a commitment from this club. To me, that is an astounding amount of money. And so, yeah, I understand that technically you don't, but boy, they're putting in $1 million almost, and it's a little bit astounding to me that you didn't have at least 1,000 people say, yeah, we're up for $1 million here. So yeah, technically, I get that.
this is Barb again. We need to remember again. We've got to go back to remembering that our responsibility is not approval of this, but we approve the process, not the outcome. So all all we're being asked to do is approve this process to move it on for governing board consideration, discussion, and approval. And if the paperwork isn't right, then we are remiss as a committee to not get that correct. So that I see as our role and responsibility, that this thing needs to stop with this motion, and we will carry it forward to the governing board when we have the updated revised CR 13 forms.
I agree
right.
with Barb. This is Marshall. I agree with Barb.
Yeah, go ahead, Marshall.
I would ultimately like to see a situation where there's a possibility of doing one and not the other, and not having them both at once. I can't see it. I can't see it.
Well, they're not building both at once. They're doing the study to see which one to do.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's an either or. It's not both. I had that
Okay,
clarified earlier.
Yeah. Okay. That's
All
fine.
right.
This is John. I got a question
Go
here.
ahead, John.
Okay, the Charter Club was not presented the information on Kuntz because that occurred. This information came out after that meeting. Does that change anything?
Yeah,
Yes,
that's what we're discussing.
that's
Okay,
what we're
so
discussing.
shouldn't it just go back
I
to
say-
start over again?
It needs
Yeah.
to go back to
Charter Club, review
Charter
it first.
Club. Yes.
They have the option based on our RNP to revise the CR 13 form. That's really where this should be.
Right.
And then it has to go back to charter clubs before it comes back to us.
That's
And then
the
it comes
correct
back to us, and then we take a vote at that time, which would be next month.
Correct. Right,
If everything went right.
right. So
Okay.
why do we want to
Excuse me,
table the motion?
Yes. This is Bob. I'd
Okay.
like to do that, and I'm also going to have to leave. But I agree that we should do it at, have it done right and have it brought back to us.
All right.
This
we have
is Barb. I make a motion that we table this.
Well, we already have a motion on the table, so we have to either withdraw
So you want
the
to second
motion.
it?
Okay.
Well,
Yeah,
then-
we have to
then-
withdraw the motion. It's already been
All right.
seconded.
I'm Bob. I'd like to withdraw the motion.
This is
All
Barb.
right.
I second it. This is Barb. I second that.
I don't think you second a withdrawal of the motion.
I don't know, but I did.
So we'll need a new
Well-
motion that this go back to the club for the correction to the CR 13 and also presented
vote?
to charter clubs.
And
we
to
need
the
a new vote?
membership.
Yeah, and to the membership, the club taking it to their membership and then start the process again. So let's
Okay.
have a motion to do that.
Yes, this is Bob. I make that motion.
All right, second.
Second.
This is
This is Barb.
Marcel.
I second
Okay.
it.
All right, I think John
I'd like
did
a vote.
already. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody against? Any no votes? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the, Carl, to your capital budget review. I hope everybody looked at the video link that was sent to you.
Good morning.
Okay, Carl?
Thank you for all that discussion. I'd just like to remind everybody, the video that was sent out to you all is a preliminary process of our policies for a budget review for all committees. And simply put, because of our virtual meetings and current COVID situations, every committee, all three, are seeing the same exact presentation that you had were given. So I open up this for any questions, And thanks again.
Do we have any questions to Carl on the capital budget review? No questions? Okay, Carl,
Yes, Roberta.
I think we're ready for you on your capital projects update.
So no questions on the previous, and the capital projects report for February 4th, 2021 is the R.H. Johnson Library Roof Restoration Project has been completed on 1/8/21. The Metal Shop Addition plans and engineering documents currently in Maricopa County for first review for the permit application. Moving on to Kuntz interior lighting conversion to LED fixtures was completed 1/15. And Beardsley Arts and Crafts parking lot entry required an emergency asphalt repair, and that was completed on 1/18. And that is all the current completions for the month. I do have a handful of projects getting ready to get started. Currently, we're working on the R.H. Johnson property line fence. It is being installed as we speak. So other than that, what's coming up is the last remaining 6 courts of R.H. Johnson bocce, and we're getting the new LED lightings converted to complete that project from the last few years. And that's about it.
Any questions for Carl? Okay, Russ?
Morning. Okay, so while we were closed, we are continuing our shower restorations. We did some maintenance on the already restored Beardsley showers, and we are doing this process as well at Palm Ridge to take advantage of us being closed. Audio-visual upgrades, where we stand so far. Lecture hall audio equipment is all on site. All will begin on February 8th. We are still waiting on the projector and the screen. The social hall is currently unscheduled at this time. Vendor does have all the equipment in their warehouse. Palm Ridge, White Tie has all audio equipment installed except for the 4 stage monitors, which are used for live events. So we're not too worried about those at that time. Those will be delivered as soon as they arrive. Projectors are also in and inspected install mid-February. Beardsley Pool, those upgrades have been completed. We had the state boiler inspector came out, which is a big to-do for us. We have to take them to all 4 centers, go through all of our boilers. They check all the safety devices. The guys spent 3/4 of the day with him. We had 2 minor issues. Alongside the Beardsley pool boiler was in the process of being changed. So we fixed the 2 minor issues and the completed Beardsley boiler, and then we'll reschedule the inspector back out. But aside from that, the inspection went very, very well. And then also while we're closed and down, we are repainting the R.H. Johnson fitness room, and I believe we just finished that up today. That's the end of my report.
Any questions for Russ? Okay, thank you. Katie, you had some to bring up about the PR at the pool?
Yeah, we had a couple items. The first one I wanted to talk about was a while back we had closed Palm Ridge for one afternoon to allow for a commercial. We were paid $2,500 for the rental. We really did it for the advertising boost to the community. You can see on your screen, this is a clip from our Facebook page. I'm not going to play the actual video for you. It's a 30-second Michael Phelps commercial for Under Armour. So, you know, he's the most decorated Olympian of all time. We thought having him swim in our Palm Ridge pool and get paid for it and be able to advertise that fact would be a huge boost to us, and it certainly has been. This was in one day after we posted it. More than 17,000 people have been reached and seen this and knows that Olympian Michael Phelps swam in our pool. It's doing huge on our Facebook page, but if you go to the Under Armour page, more than 1 million people have seen this commercial just on YouTube, let alone the views on TV because it is airing on national TV. Of course, in the ad, you can't tell it's Palm Ridge Pool, but through the social media links and the promotion and our residents sharing our posts on our Facebook with their friends who are hopefully back where it's snowing and everything else, it's really been a huge boost for the community. So just want to thank the general manager for allowing us to have that brief closure for this kind of marketing kick. I don't know if Bill has any more he'd like to add to that.
Thank you, Katie. I again just want to reiterate everything you said. I think it's a big push and a nice shot in the arm for Sun City West. Obviously, the production company that came out and filmed this have also done major movies in the area. Some filming around the Highway 303, for instance. But anyway, the scope of what they brought to our facility was very, very professional. We hope we didn't defer too many people away on the evening that they were in there filming till about 2 in the morning. But it was a great experience, and that crew having to come in here during the daylight hours obviously got to see our facilities, how nice they are, as well as our golf courses, and they did lay a comment out a couple times that they would maybe love to return, and I think we'd love to have them because it's great PR for us.
Okay.
One other thing, Roberta, we
Dave
have
Forrest.
questions.
Oh.
We have 2 questions from the audience. One is a rather long question and concern from a resident who suggested that the rec centers were going to require proof of vaccination for people to get into the rec centers. Most of her other questions are moot because we're absolutely not going to require proof of vaccination to get into the rec centers. What we are doing is watching that caseload, watching them specifically here locally and the burden on the hospitals. And when that starts to trend down a little bit more, then we will have consideration for reopening those facilities. But when we do reopen, we're still not going to require proof of vaccination. But we do have some really good news on the front of vaccinations, and I'll let the general manager speak to that.
Thanks again, Katie. And to the Properties Committee, we just want to let you know that early on when this pandemic hit, we did reach out, and we have been in communication with a lot of the local health officials, local fire department, as well as the hospital. We do have 4 recreation centers that we did kind of say if there's anything we can do to help anything that you need, please contact us and we can see what we can do. So after nearly a year, here we are, and with the onset of the vaccine program, the local hospital has, as you probably know, has a site set up kind of behind the Grandview Golf Course on the medical center side of their operation over there. And due to the ingress and egress that they're dealing with and the size of their parking lot, they're able to do about 1,100 to 1,200 vaccinations in a day. The state of Arizona gets supplied with vaccines by the number, so the more vaccines our state of Arizona can give, the more vaccines are issued to our state. And so the hospital's goal is to increase their number of shots, and so they did reach out to us and see if there's anything that they could do relative to the utilization of our parking lot. We did have a conversation with President Kuchek the other day, seeing and trying to get the board's opinion as to how we can help, and working with our legal team as well as the hospital's legal team, Maricopa County, and folks in the fire department, we are attempting to embark on creating a vaccine station in our parking lot, or a third of our parking lot, I should say, in front of the rec center social hall, to provide a nice site for additional vaccines to be available to the local residents here, as well as other community members around the area. So we hope that we can maybe help out. There's some dialogue and contracts being passed back and forth, and we hope we can potentially provide some further assistance in that area. Katie,
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything to that, Katie?
No, I would say it is still preliminary. Nothing is set in stone, but there's a lot of rumors swirling in the community. So as soon as we have something confirmed, of course, we'll put that out to the community. And as always, please check suncitywest.com/COVID-19, and we'll have all the latest information there. So don't believe the rumors if you're hearing different things about requiring vaccinations to enter the rec centers or anything like that. Just give us a call or check the Facebook website, and we'll get you the information that we have. Thanks.
You know, and if you don't mind, I just want to throw in one color comment. When Michael Phelps was in the swimming pool, we did have an opportunity to watch him swim, and I've never seen a human being create a wake behind a swimmer like he does. It was unbelievable.
All right. Do we have any, Katie, do we have any more remote guest comments?
Yes, we do, Roberta. Thank you. This question, it's quite long, and it gets into a lot of detail about video cameras being placed at some of the rec centers, who has access to these, who can view the video, invasion of privacy and such. And so if we can just get right to the point, if I think Russ has the answer on what those cameras are and who's installing them and the background on those.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. So here recently we installed cameras at racquetball, ping pong, and Zymergy, and I guess it got across as we were spying. That is definitely not the case. There's a single monitor that has to monitor all these locations. If somebody were to go down in any one of those areas, they're not going to see them. So that's what that was for. We use that at many other facilities. All the fitness facilities have these things. They do not record. It is a live view for the monitor's purpose only.
All right. Any other comments?
No other comments from the public, Roberta.
All right. From the committee? Otherwise, I'll adjourn the meeting. Our next meeting is March 4th. And again, it will be virtual. Okay, the meeting is adjourned.